Hello and welcome to Business here on Joy News Prime with me, Beverly Broom. We go straight to our very first story, and a senior finance lecturer at the University of Cape Coast, Seyram Kawo, wants government to consciously introduce special policies targeted at the agriculture sector to encourage the production and consumption of locally produced items in the country. This coming after inflation for the month of May 2023 increased to 42.2% from 41.2% recorded in April 2023. The increase was driven by food and non-alcoholic beverages, which contributed 52.4% to the overall inflation. Mr. Kawo believes government must do more in the agriculture sector to reduce prices of foodstuff.
We have not been able to look at the issues of food production to be self-sufficient in our country. When you look at the non-alcoholic beverages, just recently Parliament has passed a law that has imposed some tax on non-alcoholic beverages that we have in the country. That might, one way or the other, accounted for this inflation that we see. We have seen a surge in the utility bills over time. These utility bills that we have seen over time might have also contributed to the rate of inflation that we have in the sectors of transportation, electricity, and water. And so there is a marginal increase in inflation, and that is a bit worrying, and we need to go back and work on it. That optimism that we have in the coming of the IMF cash in itself will not directly or automatically result into inflation coming down. We need to consciously put in efforts, serious effort, to ensure that we go and produce the locally consumed products that we have in the country. There should be policies that are targeted to the agricultural sector to make sure that we produce more food. And once we produce more in the country, and then the buffer stock is able to store more food, we'll have these things coming down. The prices of our staple foods today, gari, rice, you can talk about maize, have become more than 100% on the market today because most of them are scarce. People go outside the country and bring these things down, and so the prices are going up. It is high time government comes out with policies that are deliberately targeted towards these areas so that the prices of the products will come down.
Now, banking analyst Christian Tichijan is calling for a comprehensive education on the operations of the financial sector as cases of fraud increase in the sector. According to him, regular engagement and sensitization is key to curbing the increase in cases of unlicensed entities engaged in various forms of frauds within the financial space. His comment follows a warning by the Bank of Ghana to the public agency doing any form of transactions with some 97 unlicensed institutions that are engaged in the provision of loans through mobile applications to the Ghanaian public.
I think it's important that a dialogue is open with some of these institutions to actually ascertain what might be wrong. For all you know, these institutions might have had license expired, and in their bid to have them renewed, they are facing certain challenges that are beyond their control. So for such institutions and then others who might be facing similar situations, I think there should be some sort of facilitation for them to get their licenses renewed. Of course, there will also be those that are operating without any license whatsoever, and I believe the should be cracked on them to serve as a deterrent to others. Luckily, we are having the situation where they rather have their risk assets out there, and so we wouldn't be talking about any deposit losses. Nevertheless, the right thing will have to be done, and if it means shutting them down, I'm afraid it has to be done to ensure that the sanity of the financial sector is actually protected. We are actually in a technology world, and it has formed parts of the fabric of our society, and so you will definitely be left out if you don't keep the pace. But in keeping up with the pace, you should have enough education on its risk, of course, and as much as possible, mitigants should also be built around them as far as the risk associated with them are concerned, so that everybody will be protected for the ultimate good of the society.
Moving on, cedi stability against the dollar over the past week is expected to be sustained. Those are the views of some bank treasurers that Joy Business has been engaging. The following report has more.
The Ghana cedi has seen some firm stability against the US dollar over the past week, but it is not clear for now what were the major indicators that drove the stability over the period. This is coming after the cedi suffered some losses against the American greenback, even after Ghana secured an IMF program. But engaging some bank treasurers, they maintain that they don't see any sharp reversals in the coming days. This is based on the fact that the reforms being undertaken by government under the IMF program is taking shape, and that is sending some positive signals to investors. The Bank of Ghana has been on the market over the past days, and there are plans to increase the intervention for businesses as well as the commercial banks. It is based on this development that the bank treasurers are optimistic that the local currency's performance could be sustained in the coming days.
Now, former Trades and Industry Minister Alan Tremantin has proposed for the establishment of a bank loan recovery court to help the timely closure of loan default cases in the country. According to the NPP flag bearer aspirant, this will improve the borrowing culture of small and medium enterprises and other borrowers. He was speaking to the private sector players here in Accra.
Financing to SMEs. Government will liaise with Bank of Ghana to direct banks to allocate the equivalent of a minimum of 10% of profit after tax of the previous financial year to the provision of new collateral-free concessional lending to targeted SMEs engaged in import substitution. So this is a very strategic move for those SMEs that are engaged in, particularly not only those engaged in import substitution. There could be other categories of SMEs. But the important thing is for the banks to allocate a certain minimum percentage of profit after tax for us to be able to support the SMEs. Two, government will collaborate with Bank of Ghana to provide regulatory capital incentives to SME loans given by banks at concessionary rate. We don't want to also collapse our banks, and that is why it has to be mutually beneficial to the private sector and also to banks. Number three, government will facilitate the setting up of a bank loan recovery court that will sit on a regular basis with strict delivery timelines for closure of loan default cases to improve the borrowing culture of SMEs and other borrowers. It is very important that we develop a culture of paying back money that we borrow. And if people are recalcitrant, which is what affects the appetite of the banks to loan to our companies, then there has to be a way of punishing those who still do not want to pay for loans that they get from the banks. And this is not novel. There are many countries that have such judicial bodies.
Moving on, the Institute of Fiscal Studies, IFS, is asking government to take steps to increase revenue from the extractive sector through direct state participation. The IFS is urging government to take this move in the mid-year budget review to reflect revenue targets under the IMF program. Speaking at a press conference on Ghana's 2023-2026 Extended Credit Facility Supported Program with the IMF, Senior Research Fellow of the Institute, Dr. Said Boachi, said governments can no longer rely on royalty tax approach under concession agreement in the mining sector.
Government revenue mobilization relies unduly on taxes. As a prior action for the program, many taxes were introduced in the 2023 budget, and more are likely to follow under the tax-centered revenue strategy. Yet, over-reliance on taxation is certain to hurt businesses and industries and ultimately harm the economy's competitiveness and long-term growth potential. Because of this, you have to listen to the next point. No explicit policies in the program that aim to ensure that Ghana follows the footsteps of countries that generate considerable amount of revenue from the extractive sector and use extractive exports to stabilize the city. The government keeps on over-rely on taxes and largely ignoring the extractive sector. Although, in relation to its peers, Ghana's public revenue generation is low and should be expanded. A tax-centered approach is not the way to go. From IFS research, the revenue gap between Ghana and its peers is largely due to the country's relatively poor revenue generation from the external extractive sector, which is the result of leaving the sector in the hands of multinationals through concession arrangement that yield patriot revenue to the state, while the multinationals repatriate billions of dollars in resource rents. For instance, IFS has found that out of the 22.72 billion worth of minerals produced in Ghana from 2015 to 2018, only 1.48 billion, representing a meager 6.5%, was paid as revenue to the government. Imagine that. Over 22 billion, only 1.4 billion, representing only 6.5%, was paid to the government as revenue.
The Customs Division of the Ghana Revenue Authority has confiscated a container load of goods whose owners are suspected to have evaded payment of customs duties. Initial examination on the truck revealed one unentered vehicle and 5 motorbikes. The goods have been detained pending further investigations. There's more in this report by Clinton Yeboah.
The illegal act of intentionally avoiding paying taxes and dishonesty in tax obligation to the state are deemed a severe issue in Ghana. Tax evasion includes making false declaration on tax returns and misrepresentation of trading's records. Others include misrepresentation of books of account, thus declaring less income, profits, or gains than the amount earned, or overstating deductions. In Ghana, tax evasion undermines the government's ability to collect revenue and fund essential public services and infrastructure development. It also hampers economic growth and development. The Ghana Revenue Authority on Friday, June 13th, confiscated a container of goods around Adiemra in Kumasi. Kwame Ajiman-Bedu, the preventive officer in charge of the Ashanti Regional Custom Division, revealed the perpetrators, if found guilty, will pay a 300% penalty for duty.
We had an intel on Friday that there was a container around Adiemra, Kumasi, and goods were being discharged, but the suspicion was that the duties have not been paid on the goods. So when I had information, I informed my sector commander in the person of Mrs. Vivian Glover. So she gave me the go-ahead to mobilize men to go to the scene. Quickly we did that. Our officers moved to the scene, and lo and behold, they found a container loaded on a truck. So they told the people to bring the container into our yard, which they complied. Upon examination, we realized there was unmanifested, unentered vehicle and 5 motorbikes, which were also not unentered. So we quickly informed the sector commander, who gave instructions that the goods should be detained pending further investigations.
Some importers have raised concerns about vicious processes at the customs. Assistant Commissioner and the Sector Commander of Kumasi Collection, Vivian Glover, says the exercise forms part of an intensified operation.
We are partners in the development of the nation. We are just implementers of policies. We have been mandated to collect revenue, and the importers are our partners. In actual fact, they have to import before we can also get a job to do. So there is no way we can vindicate them or target them for anything. Yeah, if anything, we should encourage them to comply, do the right thing, and then be able to import more so that we can also get the required revenue for the nation. Yeah, this is just a coincidence. It is not a vindication. Just as we were at the meeting on Thursday, engaging with them, and they were telling us about their concerns, that officers have been harassing them, intercepting their containers. Unfortunately, this is just a coincidence to prove that it is not that we deliberately harass them. We do it upon intelligence.
Reporting for Joy News, Clinton Yaboa.
Now, the Ghana Chamber of Automobile Dealership Ghana and the Ghana Union of Traders Association are lamenting what they say is incessant pestering by officials of the Customs Division of the Ghana Revenue Authority. They say the exhaustive scrutiny and unfair checks they are subjected to at the ports and regional checkpoints are causing unnecessary delays, negatively impacting business operations. Many are losing millions of cedis as a result. There's more in this report.
The Chamber of Automobile Dealership Ghana says the lengthy and cumbersome inspection they are subjected to is due to the mistrust of the Customs Division. This, they allege, has collapsed businesses and led to additional cost in business operations. The concerns were raised at a stakeholder meeting between the Chamber, GUTA, and the Customs Division of the Ghana Revenue Authority. John Dumenu is Executive Secretary of the Chamber of Automobile Dealership Ghana.
You know that any impediment or delay, for example, most often at times, we have customers that are waiting for the goods that we went to Tema and Takrach to cut to our various warehouses. So in a likely event, your client is waiting for you and there's delay, that client will not have that interest to buy the goods. So when you bring the goods, it becomes useless and you know that it brings additional cost.
Executive Secretary of the Ashanti Business Owners Association, Charles Kusi Apiakubi, says the government's policies for businesses have been counterproductive. He observes the business community is losing the opportunity to employ.
Now we understand part of IMF policy government is not supposed to employ. And we have a lot of graduates coming out from schools. Their expectations, their aspirations is the one day they will be employed. Government that probably could have been the first employer says, I cannot employ. The next option is the business people. And your policies have collapsed our businesses. So how do we employ our young guys? How are we going to do that? That's why our request, our advocacy have not been inward looking. It's about the holistic development of this economy and the support to that young person whose dream is one day he can also impact his knowledge in building this country.
Deputy Commissioner of Operations at the Customs Division, Bafo Yao Asare Anane, says thorough interceptions of goods at the ports cannot be relaxed as it is often intelligence-led. However, he has assured his officials will discontinue inconveniencing traders at the port.
Of course, we try to minimize the inconveniences as much as possible. If it is necessary that we do the re-examinations at the premises of the importer to ease things for them, we will do that. But like I said, we cannot give an assurance that we will stop interceptions because they are mostly intelligence-led. Results from the revenues that we've collected in Kumasi here underscores the reason why we cannot stop those interceptions, because invariably every container that we have intercepted, we have found unpaid duties and we have collected those duties and imposed penalties.
For Joy Business, Mona Lisa Frimpong reporting.
Now, the president of African Center for Economic Transformation, Dr. Kingsley Amoako, has called on government to manage its expenditure and debts properly to prevent the country from returning to the International Monetary Fund to seek for a bailout after the current program ends. According to him, the country can do this by properly mobilizing revenue locally. He was speaking at the opening of the Made in Africa Leadership Conference.
The Made in Africa Leadership Conference by BCA Leadership is aimed at boosting the economic development of the African continent. The conference was held under the theme, Making Africa Work for Africans, Collaborations and Partnerships. In an interview with Joy Business, President of the African Center for Economic Transformation, Dr. Kingsley Amwaku, urged government to manage its expenditure properly to prevent a return to the International Monetary Fund.
I mean, we all say Ghana has been to the IMF 17 times. I'm glad that we have this program now in place. It's not been easy, so I think I'm happy that it's there. But the question is, what do we need to do so that 5 years down the line we don't do so again? That's the issue. And there are a lot of things that's coming. Our expenditure management, we need to raise more revenues, domestic resource mobilization. We need to manage our debt better. So all those are issues, but I think it can be done.
President of BCA Leadership, Modukpe Taylor Pierce, urged African leaders to manage their finances and ensure a steady development of their economies.
It is unfortunate that a lot of African countries have to go to the IMF, and there are sometimes some reasons why you have to do it. But we have to remember this. It is just like when you have your house. If you are not able to manage your finances for you and your husband and your children, or you and your wife and your children, and every time you have to go to your brother or your uncle to say, please give me some money. The first thing that we need to do in Africa is we need to start as living within our means. And that is our leaders. So our leaders from the president on need to start living within our means. You cannot be unable to balance your own checkbook and then you are taking a private jet with 53 people to go to a meeting somewhere. That does not make sense. Okay? So first we have to balance our own checkbook by putting austerity on ourselves, and then on our cabinet, and then when we have done that, then we can ask the citizenry to also do a little bit of belt tightening.
The Made in Africa Leadership Conference will have leaders of various organizations deliberating on strategies to grow and lead their various ventures.
And that's our package for tonight. We have more business stories when you log on to myjoyonline.com/business. My name is Beverly Broom. I leave you with news making headlines on the international front.